TV industry has a history with introducing problematic Arab representations. As scholar Jack Shaheen writes, there are many forms of this problematic representation. Many times, Arabs are represented as tribal or Bedouin, as rich and shallow, as the oppressors and the oppressed, and well, the villain characters. In many TV series, Arabs usually take the antagonist roles, but they're way too backwards to be the main antagonists. So well, the media producers will make the Russians pay them to do some radical, evil activities without being the brains behind it. And these are some pretty recognizable scenes. This is not to say that Hollywood is far from representing the true Arab identity, because the true Arab identity does not exist in any way, shape, or form. The Arab identity, which we are only calling it that for simplicity reasons, is way too complex. It consists of 22 countries, many races, a combination of ethnicities, a plethora of religions, yet we still get a typical recurring negative Arab representation. The concept of Arab identity that you have going through your mind right now is probably based on that. Bombers, belly dancers, or billionaires. A product of Orientalism, as Edward Said will say, pinning the Orient against the Occident and creating an entire narrative that reduces the vast Orient to a few radical ideas that are then internalized. The Orient is portrayed as something that's in the East. It's a clasp of many nationalities painted with a combination of silk dresses, exotic or oppressed women, macho men, and exotic seeming music, but there's a backward cultural undertone relating to radicalism, and it still exists to this day. A good example is the series The Messiah, where we see Arab radicalism and terrorism. But also, I argue that there is now something else going on. A new form of Orientalism that is not problematic because of its explicit radicalism, but because of its implicit negative representation. As the TV industry moves towards more inclusive, diverse, and improved representations, the improvements don't go way too far for Arabs. Instead, I think the very improvement in TV representations are just new forms of covert Orientalism, and really we haven't moved much from the inferior outlook on Arabs. Let's take the representation in Orange is the New Black as an example. In this scene, Shani, who is an Egyptian inmate detained by the ICE for being an illegal immigrant, is not portrayed as your typical Arab radicalist, the ones that Shaheen describes. She does not hold a gun and scream violently. Shani is portrayed as someone who is liberal and spiritually free. She is a member of the LGBT community and does not carry her so-called Arab identity on her forehead. Nevertheless, as we learn about Shani's character, we find out that she has trauma from female genital mutilation in Egypt, as well as from her parents finding out that she had a girlfriend and threatening her with her death. We also find out that Shani came to America to so-called escape all of this. She is liberated from the radical oppression when she is in the US, and so she can freely rebel against the radicalism. Aside that mutilation is banned in the Arab world, and that the actress is a white, blue-eyed Lebanese, and that the Lebanese and Egyptian identity is blurred as if the Arab world is all one country, there is another narrative, one that rebels against Arab radicalism but paradoxically reconfirms Arab radicalism, forming a new Arab representation that reflects Stephen Sheehy's book on modern Arab identity, that wants to specifically base itself on Western ideals. This identity wants to rebel against so-called Arab radical family and cultural norms, which, well, the media has decided on pretty randomly because, well, it adds some sauce to the story and that's about it. Shani's character frequently wears American accessories, like the beanie and denim jacket. With that, Shani frequently asks about American culture, like when she asks about tater tots, and the response is usually interesting and liberal, while she totally condemns her own Arab radical culture. Another example is from the Spanish drama series Elite, where a Palestinian character called Nadia is a hijabi Arab that breaks the rules. Well, the rules being oppression of her culture and family. She takes off her hijab in school, where she starts to become more free. She then falls in love with a Spanish boy called Guzman, who then becomes her white savior, helping her deal with her dramatic oppressive roots. The hijab then moves to become a motif of oppression. When off, she is free. When on, she is not. This is also combined with the use of Oriental music, loud voices, and very tribal-like clothes when portraying Nadia's family. Also, Nadia's brother is gay, who must object his Arabness and faith to become who he truly wants to be, re-emphasizing the radical Arab ideologies, except more implicitly. Netflix perhaps patted themselves on the back for including an Arab family, but Elite really needs to be criticized for not treating its Arab Muslim teenagers as white teenagers with storylines that do not involve them acting out or repressing themselves because of their culture and fear of their parents. We also see the same thing happen in the series MR.ROBOT, where Shama Biswas, also known as Trenton in the series, wears a hijab as she lives with her immigrant parents in Brooklyn. However, as she moves and runs away from home, fearing for her own safety, she is then later mother seen in Arizona with her headscarf removed. A fourth example is the drama series Homeland. Homeland obviously contains blatant radicalism and terrorist portrayals, but it includes the character of Farah Shirazi, who is a well-rounded, hardworking, and loyal to the American CIA. She is liberal, she is smart, and she does her job right. However, there's a constant personal dilemma in her identity. Her culture clashes with what she's doing. She's a multi-faced, well-rounded representation, but then her oppressive Arabness catches up to her in the same way it does to all the Arab characters I talked about. She gets killed by a radical terrorist for betraying her Arabness, and here we are again re-emphasizing that the Arab oppressive roots eventually become the downfall of every liberal character. Arab radicalism is just packaged differently as it previously was. Scholar Mansour talks about it in his 2015 paper on anti-Arab propaganda. As we see the TV industry give out more roles that represent minorities, they move away from having villain Arab terrorists stick out like a thumb of a hand and now do this more differently. Past the textbook Orientalism and vilification representation of Arabs, they constructed as a narrative of rebellion against Arab radicalism and oppressive roots through liberal characters into a reconceptualized representation, basically an identity moving towards Western ideal but is always and constantly slowed down by its radical Arabness.